Hi, this is Mike making my video. Today's Thursday, the 24th of April, 2020, 2024. No, 2025. Excuse me. It's quarter to 9 p.m. So anyway, yeah, it's either 2024 or 2025. I'm not sure, but I think it's 2025. So anyway, yeah, I'm talking about the absurdism that life presents, um, and the profound awakening uh, that we can experience. Uh, so, with that being said, there's a way to awaken the subconscious mind, and more or less what it is by you could take mushrooms or hash oil or acid, basically, or meth, things like that. But what that does is, like the venom of a frog, and what it does is it paralyzes the body and the biofeedback uh, mechanisms to the mind. It's like a DOS operating system, if you imagine, and you got Windows on top of that, which would be your executive functions. But anyway, if you disable the DOS, what happens is your subconscious mind starts to rule, and that's the God's foolishness. That's actually uh, the Queen of Heaven, Sophia. And what it is uh, when you paralyze the body, when you go to sleep, your body goes into paralysis, to protect you from getting injured while you sleep. But anyway, when that happens, what takes over is your subconscious mind, and it produces uh, a load of DMT, and that DMT while you sleep, you can do anything in your dream state. And what happens is that filters into your waking state if you meditate long enough and you stay by yourself and you're alone. And anyway, it bleeds through into the waking state. And then when you shut the DOS system off, biofeedback of your body, it tricks your mind into thinking that you died. And and then what takes place is a fantasy world. And long story short is this fantasy world, you can do anything, and then that bleeds through into the physical state of being. And very, it takes a lot of skill, a lot of training, and with the right amount of training and the right amount of control over your mind, you learn to be adept at doing those types of things. And what takes place is you're wide awake, and your subconscious mind starts to rule. And sometimes you notice that you're kind of out of your mind, you're not in your right mind, and that's just attributed to basically your subconscious mind taking over. And then the slave, the master and the slave. So anyway, they say a slave is never greater than its master. But then again, in certain scriptures, it says that God's foolishness is greater than man's wisdom. So, your rational mind, sometimes your subconscious mind, the Queen of Heaven, basically takes over, and then, Sophia does. And she, more or less, the feminine part of your mind, the creative side, takes over, and then you're presented with miracles. And these miracles, when you collapse a wave function and you start to experience miracles, windows of heaven open up, and they pour down a blessing so big you can't contain it. And that means your eyes, your eyes become opened. And you turn your eyes into an eye, the third eye, more or less. I think the third eye is basically governed by the subconscious mind. And in the internal world, the subjective. And the objective mind, your eyes, your two eyes are in the outward reality, the outward expression of this reality. At any rate, they're both states of being that are basically inside of you. Uh, you know, uh, let's say you take your finger and you move it just outside your point of view in your peripheral vision, it disappears. And it's not so much that it's out of your sight, it's just your mind doesn't register it anymore. And I've had experiences where, there was a window in a room across the hall, and I turned my head just enough, and more or less what took place is the window had a film covering it, and that film was a gray film, like a Polaroid picture that was pulled out too fast, and or it's an overexposed picture, that turns out gray, and that's more or less what it looked like. So it told me, that everything that we see, everything that we smell, taste, touch, hear, all those senses are electrical impulses that come into your brain. And your brain makes it real because you have a processing unit that takes those impulses and then basically turns them into, something that looks real. So in essence, that's really what it is. They're just impulses, electrical impulses. So without, without the governance of your mind, where it turns all those things into realities, things don't exist. They disappear. They just vanish. And, that's really what the instance with that window was. Is it was outside my field of view. And as soon as I just barely turned my head, it was out of my view. But then as soon as, and I could still see it, but then it had a gray film over the window. So there's that. And then there was another instance where I was dreaming about Pixar cartoons, and I was in that reality, and everything was like a computer generated video game. And I woke up and I looked at my dog, and she was a Pixar dog, computer generated. And then anyway, after about a second, then she turned into in a twinkling of an eye, she turned into a regular dog. So the only difference between a computer generated NPC and a person is more or less the detail in their appearance. So in essence, they're really just computer generated. It's like that movie The Matrix, when they got that crowd and they saw the woman in the red dress, and everyone else was just an NPC actor in the game. And that's really ultimately what it is I'm an illusion and so is everybody else. The only thing that makes those illusions seem real is when they say they have a name, or they have a birth certificate, or they give me some personal information about themselves, but really ultimately they're just NPCs. And I can make those I've made those NPCs disappear before. So that just tells me that it's just a very elaborate, very well crafted, very detailed illusion. So anyway, you're playing Grand Theft Auto, and you're driving, and then all of a sudden you turn your head to the right, and there's a whole side view, and there's a front view, and I mean, there's games now where you can turn all the way around, and you can, with virtual reality, and you can see behind yourself, and you're driving a tank or something. But the thing is the computer, the CPU, is generating those images as you drive. And it's not like, it's real. It's an illusion. And there's other games too, when you go into a new area, different aspects of that game, start to materialize, and it's not any different than this reality. Things disappear in this reality and they vanish, or they start on fire, or they freeze, or they change colors. You know, so it tells me that nothing is real until you observe it, and then when you're in the act of creating, you're creating on the fly. You're creating things as you observe them. It's not so much that you discover reality, you're creating it as you observe it at the same instant. So yeah, that's all it is. It's sad but true. It's that song, I'm your life, I'm the one that took you there. Hey, hey, I'm your life. And then I'm the one who cares. And then anyway, it goes on throughout the song, I'm your eyes when you must steal, I'm your pain when you can't feel. Sad but true. And then it gets to the end, it actually talks about, how, you're actually nothing, and, your subconscious mind actually convicts you. It talks about the Holy Spirit, can convict you, and, there's that. And then there's, you think about it, it's not worth it, to kill everybody because you don't like the way they look at you or whatever, and then, maybe something you really want. Is it worth stealing over? Is it worth, or, you're being a drug runner and you're doing all this stuff. Is it worth your freedom? Like El Chapo, to possess all that stuff, all the guns, all the gold, all the girls in the world couldn't get you off. So, all the tools in the box, So, sometimes you realize you just live a modest lifestyle and you don't worry too much about outward influences. You try to take care of your responsibilities when you can. That's all you really can do. So anyway, there's that, and then there's, the whole idea that life is absurd, We're the only ones that can make sense of our surroundings. You get a dog sometimes and they rely on us, but, we're the only ones that can truly make sense of our surroundings. And as a man, women tend to be foolish, and they don't really plan, and they don't necessarily, do things that are more associated with what a man would do. And it's just the way it is. They're helpers and stuff, and their purpose in life is to take care of kids and stuff like that. And it's like, that's why they're childish, because they're more on the line with taking care of little kids and children. But once they get to the point where there is no purpose left, then they feel like they don't have any meaning in life. And then if they don't have a man to love them, when their looks start to fade, then they're kind of wasted. And a man's much the same way, when he doesn't have a woman in his life. He sticks to solitude, and you gotta realize that being solitary, content with everything, is a better state of being. It's almost better to have a baseline where you're content with everything. You're not overly happy, and all happiness is relief from suffering. So that's, in understanding things. Sometimes you have a lot of understanding, and with understanding comes misery. And that's just because you're aware of how things really are. And, it's all just an illusion. I mean, you think about it, and there's probably a point in time when we're not going to be anything, This heaven and the one above it pass away. So that means this heaven's an illusion, hell's an illusion, and so is heaven. So, anyway, just make the best of what you got. Eat, drink, and be merry, and work with your hands, and do what you can in this short life of yours.